So, hello everyone. We are going to start here our Brains for Europe online multiplier event. I'm Pedro Piedras from Mares Virtuales, one of the partners involved in this marvelous project of Brains for Europe and one also of the organizers of this event. Yeah. So apart from the schools, I'm going to refer a little bit later. And the other collaborators of this project have been IESCIL, Instituto de Ciencias de la Salud de Castilla y León from Spain, Premium Research, also an organization from Spain, the Mutualité Française Anjou-Magen from France, and and as I told you, some of the schools we are going to know a little bit later. So this is an online event. We have to admit that COVID-19 has made us changing everything from our previous and from our first thoughts. So in the beginning, we have thought to make an offline event also here in Spain with Cristobal Cobo, but that was impossible. And the same as our brains are normally changing absolutely just to find some solutions when there is a problem, using its neuroplasticity. I think that we have also changed everything to adapt this multiplier event to another version, and this is the result of many months of work. So I want to express, of course, my gratitude with Cristobal Cobo for having attended our call immediately from the very beginning, from all the time he has given us to organize that. I want to also to give my thanks to the rest of the Brains for Europe crew, to Mares Virtuales team working very hard to carry on with this session, and of course to all the people that today, this Friday, sunny here in Spain, are at this hour just being with us for this session. I have to say that there are many countries involved in this session. There are people from Poland, from Turkey, from Romania, from Iceland, from France, from Spain, from Australia, from Chile, from Portugal, from Peru, from Colombia, from Mexico, Argentina, Venezuela, United Kingdom, Ecuador, Puerto Rico, USA, Uruguay, Sweden, and Panama. Probably there are many others from different countries because the people have been joining the session also in the latest hours, but I want to give thanks to all of you. So not to get you stressed, I'm going to make a little presentation of, I don't know, 7 minutes more or less. I want to express and to explain a little bit what is our project Brains for Europe about. And then we are going to have some minutes for the introduction of the different schools having taken part in our project. And then we are listening to Cristobal Cobo, which is, of course, the most important thing of this session, okay? So, Brains for Europe wants overall to bring neurosciences closer to the schools, closer to the students. Our aim has been in these years to contribute to change the way our students understand learning. So in the project, they have reflected, the students have reflected on some topics, on some big ideas, such as critical thinking, such as sick brain, healthy brain, learning to learn, and so on, using a kind of a new methodology, which is in a way a patchwork of different interesting methodologies that we have organized in our own methodology. The name of our methodology is ACTIVE. ACTIVE because it is coming from A, that is alternative to conventional methods, comes from C, from creative. So creative is that inspiring creation. The T is coming from transnational. The I is coming from inclusive, so accessible to students with any impairment. A V comes from vital, so it's demanding passion, demanding emotion, demanding experience. And E is coming from engaging, so incorporating everyone through challenges. So you can see more about our project if you visit our web page in brainsforeurope.eu. Okay, so the way we have been working with the students at the beginning, we have worked all together, but after the pandemic, we have changed it a little bit, and we have started with different speeds of the project. We have overall centered our works and our interests in these schools that are schools from rural areas in Europe. So, and these schools have built inside the own school some meta schools, so schools dedicated to our project. And so teachers became neuro mentors. So, and they have tried to organize more or less all the activities. A little bit later, so in a moment, you are going to know these 5 schools from Iceland, Poland, Turkey, Romania, and Spain. But I have to say that students have divided the work in 3 different stages. The first stage is a stage of engagement, is the engaged part, and it is the moment when they start making questions about everything, and the students have come up to a challenge that has in the end set on all the different parts of the project. After the engagement, when they wanted to answer to the challenge, they have started the investigate part. This part of investigation is a moment to work with resources, to share knowledge, to try to make a kind of synthesis of what they are doing in the investigation. And in the end, this is the moment for acting. And acting is to share the knowledge with the rest of the people in the school and in the society in very different possibilities. So sometimes with poems, or with a kind of video, a kind of performance, a kind of lecture, or whatever. So I have to repeat once again that we have worked quite a lot in the beginning. So working in the same ideas, in the same big ideas. A little bit later, having different speeds, but always with imagination, with passion, and so with this idea of developing and knowing a little bit more our brains. So the motto, and I'm going to finish with it, the motto of our project is better brains for a better world. And this is in the end what we want to show you here, and what we want, just inviting Cristobal Cobo, that is somebody that is always inside the things we are developing in the project. So now it's time for the different schools. First of all, we are going to know a little bit from our school in Iceland. Hello, Iceland. Hello, Sonia.
Hello, Restos. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Sonja Suska, and I'm teaching in Blönduós in Northwest Iceland. Our school has about 140 students from 1st to 10th grade. Students in our school could choose Brains for Europe as an optional subject, and I was supposed to meet them once a week for 40 minutes. So Pedro has already explained to you how we worked on the methodology, so I will tell you what topics our students worked on. So we started in autumn 2019 by investigating critical thinking. students' research question were, for example, why is critical thinking important, or can critical thinking be taught? And I must admit that Mr. Trump and his favorite topic, fake news, helped a little bit to start. I think in most of the country, we used fake news as a starter. And here in Iceland, we even made it on TV with this topic. So after that, we began a period on the topic Learn to Learn, and students checked out their own talents by using Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. And then COVID came and a lot of restriction, and we just couldn't meet. But now on the final meetings, we speeded up, and our next topic was brain fit. And we had a Zoom meeting with a nutritionist from Reykjavik, and students made a video with their findings. And finally, just last week, we went to Reykjavik and took 6 students, and we met one of Iceland's leading sleep experts, Dr. Erla Björnsdóttir, and we had a workshop in Reykjavik, and that was really great. And so we're still working on this topic, and we're planning to do more research and make another video. Thank you.
So thank you, Sonia. Thanks a lot. I mean, I have to admit that Iceland has been really a very important part of our project. Now it's time for Romania from Oana. Hello, Oana. Hello, Romania.
Hello, hello. My name is Oana Șulic. I am an English teacher at Mihail Sadoveanu School from Romania, one of the partner schools involved in this project. It is a small village school, small, but with a strong team of hardworking students and teachers. We were all looking forward to this event, which is one of the most important steps of our work together. So thank you all for being here with us.
Thanks, Romania. Thanks, Oana. Thanks a lot. Now it's time for Turkey. And I can remember very especially that time all together before COVID in Istanbul. That was a very nice moment. Hello, Burçin. Hello, Turkey.
Hello from Turkey. My name is Burçin Arslan. I am working Kumluca Anatolian High School as an English teacher. Kumluca is in Antalya. You know Antalya, I think, generally Istanbul and Antalya. And we have 450 students in our school. We are high school. Firstly, we started this project as a 15 students. We did an exam because our project language is in English. But in this COVID process, my students changed their school. They went to special schools. We are public school now. And we tried to do best. We did our meetings via Zoom. In this process, the most important topic for me and for my students, mindfulness in this process. I think this is really important. And thank you for all of your support now. Thank you.
Thank you, Burçin. Thank you, Turkey. Now it's time for Poland. Monica and Kasia is waiting for us. Hello, Poland.
Hello. Welcome to Poland. My name is Monika Solecka, and this is my close colleague, Kasia Górnik. I'm mathematics teacher, and Kasia, she is an English teacher. We both work at the primary school Zespół Szkół w Kochanowicach. And in Kochanowice is a small village in the Silesia in the South Poland. And together with Kasia, we did this project.
Okay, so we worked with 2 groups of students, first with 8th graders and this year with 6th graders. We focused on 3 big ideas, which were healthy brain, what's good for our brain, critical thinking, and how does sport affect our brain. We worked by learning to ask questions, define key, essential, and guiding questions. We looked for the best ways to present the retreat information, organize and classify it to make it more understandable. We learned how to question opinions, how to express our opinions, and how to have a discussion. And we had a lot of fun doing it.
The beginning of the whole project and the big motivator for us, of course, was the training that took place in Medina del Campo about neuroscience. And it initiated huge changes in our way of teaching. From this training, I especially remember one slogan, which was, "Emotions are necessary for learning." And evoking emotions, formulating theses, and constructing tasks in such a way as to evoke curiosity, disbelief, and even opposition. And after that beginning, we took part in a lot of trainings here in Poland about neuroscience and about critical thinking. And after that, we conducting classes with the use of new knowledge and following step by step by our methodological guide.
And of course, during the whole process, there were problems of difficulties. For example, the outbreak of a pandemic and the closure of schools in Poland, and enormous stress with students, parents, and teachers we were struggling with. But instead, we would like to share with you the positive impact of the project on the students and the teachers of our school.
Our main goal was revive the learning process and motivate students, because we had the problem like that in our classes. And after pilot, before a project, I can definitely say that this slogan, which I heard during the training, was confirmed, that emotions play the key role. For example, in order to focus students' attention on a given topic, it's enough to ask, for example, some intriguing question. And here, critical thinking is very important competence. For example, for me, during the maths classes, it's much better to answer another time, "Ma'am, who buys 170 watermelons?" than silence in the class. So for me, this method was great. This way of learning teaches students how to discover, how to find the truth independently and verifying them. So.
And we think that the changes that took place in our work were also influenced by the fact that we carried this project with people who, despite of the fact that they are from different parts of the Europe, they all share one passion for teaching and improving this process.
Yeah, I think it was great to have opportunity to exchange our experience, to talk students from other countries. I remember that when we had the meeting in Iceland, I had the conversation with the students, and they who said that they were aware of what they were learning for and how they came to it. It was very important for me. So we encourage all teachers to take advantage of this opportunity to implement projects like that, because guys, you know, when you prepare a project like that, you are for a moment students, and using your empathy, you can improve the whole process. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot. I mean, this is the evidence of the power of neuro mentoring here in the project. Thanks a lot, Paul. And now, last but not least, it's time for Spain, for Maria Jose in Medina del Campo. Hello, Spain.
Hello, how are you? Well, my name is Maria Jose, as Pedro said, and together with my colleague Irene Simon, we represent San Jose School, which has more or less 600 students. We have had 13 teenage students involved in the project, and they have always been interested about working on it because of the discoveries they could make. Well, they have learned a lot, but they have also had the opportunity to work during COVID confinement. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, this is the problem of of being alive.
I'm really sorry. Sorry. Well, we have investigated a lot, and we started investigating about critical thinking because they said they usually studied by memorization. And this was bad because they usually forgot things easily. So when we started studying or investigating about critical thinking, they discovered the benefits for their lives, not just academically, but for their personal lives. And they also saw the way they could train it. So they have made a presentation, which we think is really interesting, with those benefits and those tips that everyone can follow to get that critical thinking. And I think they will show it to the rest of the school in June, probably at the end of the school year. So I think it has been very interesting for everyone. As Monica said, we have been students for a time because we were not experts in this topic, but we have learned a lot, and I hope we can put it into practice.
Thanks a lot, Maria Jose. Thanks a lot to all of you. I have to tell you that at the very beginning of the session, there has been a problem with the platform that is now solved, and some people couldn't go in, and so I think everything is solved, and all the people is having the possibility of coming without any problem. So I have to apologize for this. So in the name of the production of the session. Okay, so now it's time for the for Cristobal Cobo. First of all, I want to make a very little introduction because probably many of the people that are here knows him very well. So Cristobal Cobo is overall an education specialist. He served as founding director of the Center for Research, Ceibal Foundation in Uruguay. And he was associated researcher at the Oxford Internet Institute of the University of Oxford. As he says, he I don't know what. So you can see me, yeah. So I was telling that that as he says, he works at the intersection between the future of learning, culture of innovation, and human-centered technologies. So Cristobal Cobo has got some books. I want to talk about three of them that I appreciate quite a lot. One of them is that book written with John Moravec, Invisible Learning Towards a New Ecology of Education. Another one is Depending Innovation, Reflections and Provocations on Education, Technology and Knowledge. And the last one, I Accept the Terms and Conditions, Uses and Abuses of Digital Technologies. So I met Cristobal Cobo for the first time quite a long time ago in Peñaranda de Bracamonte, in Mares Virtuales Center in Spain, and of course, talking about learning. We have chosen Cristobal Cobo because he knows that the real revolutions in the world can only come through learning. He uses critical thinking to call everything into question, and he is not taking anything for granted. As the good masters, he is not teaching anything. He is just showing us some ways, and we have the option of following or not to follow in those ways. But I think that this is the good way of doing things, talking about learning, talking about education. In the very core of Brains for Europe, of this project we are showing here, Cobo's ideas have always been present, and today it is of course a pleasure for us that he is personally here in front of us in a way to close the circle of our project. Well, just one more thing, if during the session you want to ask any question, write it in the chat, okay? And with an indication at the beginning, writing #question, and then you post a question, okay? #question in the chat, and then you post a question. Thanks a lot, Cristobal Cobo. Now it's time for you, and thanks a lot for your being here.
Thank you very much, Pedro, Oscar, and all the team. I'm delighted to be with you today. We started the discussion about this activity weeks before the explosion of the pandemic. How much has changed the world ever since? As you said at the very beginning, this is an extraordinary opportunity for applying and use our neuroplasticity. If this is not a good opportunity for that, then what? So I'm very, very happy, and I'm very pleased as well of having this opportunity to reflect with you. But also I'm super surprised that you are investing part of your Friday's evening to have this discussion with me. So for all these reasons, thank you so much. So my goal for today is to invite you in a journey in which we can explore a little bit of the brain, a little bit of innovation, how we can work together to build a kind of distributed brain of capacities, and at the same time, what can be the role of technologies. So perhaps to start, we can frame the presentation of today with this idea. We all live in an environment in which there are massive amount of technology, some of them very, very incredible. However, one of the most challenging transformations is not to acquire new hardware or software, but is to transform our mindware. And this sounds easy, but it takes a lot of work, because changing the way we think, this humanware, how we approach to the reality, is not always that easy. A clear example is we have had for years the possibility of working together and remotely, but we had to have the pandemic in order to transform the way we work. Not because we didn't have the technology, but because of the changes in the mindware have a legacy. They take some time. So we will talk a little bit about the brain. We will talk about a little bit about the collaboration, distributed ways of building brains, cognitive and social emotionals. I will highlight some ideas on the use of technology and the digital culture that is behind, and some takeaways. So perhaps to start, one of the main challenges we have is we are coming from an analog world in which many of the structures of the knowledge that we have dealt with along our life are organized like a book: introduction, development, and conclusion. And the book is structured and categorized in chapters. And this is very similar how we have been structuring formal education in different levels. We have math, we have history, we have law, and we have social science, and here we have other STEM career disciplines. And this is very efficient for structuring the information, but has very little to do with how we deal with information in the real life, which is a metaphor of the internet, not because of the cables, but because everything is intertwined and well connected. When we think how we can connect the different sources of knowledge, the different contexts, the formal and informal learning, we go to this phrase of George Siemens, which is the network is the learning, the possibility of building bridges, the possibility of connecting things that are not necessarily naturally connected. So let's dive a little bit into the brain. The brain is not an empty box that needs to be full with ideas, but much more a space for building connections. So every time that we learn something new, we tend to link it with something that we already know. Or with an experience we had, or with something we heard, or with something that is in our existing ecosystem of ideas. Therefore, in order to innovate, we have to be really open to create these new connections. And I think this might be evident, but it's not necessarily evident, because in many cases, the emphasis is on dumping a lot of information in our brain and not necessarily facilitating this connection. And I want to say that because I think that one of the challenges we have is how can we transition from understanding technologies as tools for transferring information to tools that can facilitate new connections, like the different streets on a city, in which the more you travel along the city, the more you build the connections between the different neighborhoods. And I will get back to this idea in a minute. So let's say, for instance, I'm going to start with an abstract approach, and then we'll go into much more concrete examples. Say, for instance, you acquire a new idea, a new data, a new historic moment, the innovation that will help us to get out of a pandemic. It's a specific data at the specific entry point, but this entry point will really make sense when we understand it, when we transition from knowing to understanding, meaning that when that entry point, this value, this piece of information is contextualized with the information we already have. And the more opportunities we have to practice what we have learned, this new idea, the more we can embed this new approach and we can develop some level of mastery. Now, therefore, it's super important to promote complex ideas that allow us to build these new neural connections. So for instance, when we approach the global warming is a complex problem, sorry, because we have to connect with the global warming, we have to address how we produce energy and how we spend the energy, how we distribute the waste of the energy, what actions we have, what economical and social implications. So it's definitely a complex problem. That's why it's so difficult to tackle. But at the same time, it's a way of building connection between our previous experience and some of the things that we can learn throughout this new lens. Now, our brain learns in very different ways, and we have different speeds for learning. For instance, we all know that we have the working memory, which is this quick snapshot that we get, for instance, when you are learning a new pair of words from a new language. You memorize 2, 3, 5 words, and we are highly sensitive of the visual and the audio, and that we can have a very short retention of those words. For instance, when you go to a restaurant and you order something, it's quite likely that you will forget the ingredients that you saw in the menu. This is a working memory and is very helpful. But at the same time, we have the other memory, which is the long-term memory that we acquire, we inherit when we have had the opportunity to practice. The more we practice, the more tacit it becomes, the more non-verbal. As well, the more we become automatic using that. When you wake up in the morning, you take the shower, you make a coffee, you are not thinking, you are working in automatic fashion, right? And the more you do it, the less mistakes you make. Now, it's important to have both. But in some cases, we have to see practices to transition from the working memory to the long-term memory. And this is the goal of the conversation that I want to give you. So let's go to London for a minute. London is such a beautiful city, has a glorious Thames that goes all around the town, and it's at the same time a crazy city. It has huge amount of streets. And in London, to be a taxi driver, you need to get a license, which is, as has been said, the most difficult driving license in the world. Why? Because to be a cab driver, you need to pass a very difficult exam, which is called the knowledge. And how do you pass this exam? You have to keep in your brain 25,000 streets, 20,000 landmarks in the city. Can you imagine how difficult can that be? Well, how do they learn how to do that? It takes years, between 3 and 4 years it taking most of the applicants. So it goes in the same way that I told you a minute ago. You get a book called The Knowledge of London, and you study the streets, the names, which are avenues, which are small streets, which are street without exits. This is the most theoretical one, a new concept. Then you have a look at the map, and you see where those streets are located and which are the main avenues and which are the less affluent streets. Now the applicants, they go into a Vespa and they drive to the city 8 hours a day. They say Monday, Friday, 8 hours for a number of years, plus studying the Blue Book. And then they go and pass the exam, which is very difficult. After this time, only one of several pass the exam, and many others have to apply and later on try again because it's very hard. And after that, when they become taxi drivers, then they adopt this mastery of the city. So you see the different stages, but at the same time, you might be wondering why on earth people are doing all these things if we have GPS. Well, the truth is the GPS is not going to tell you which are the most beautiful streets, or might not be able to tell you which of those streets can have more connections with the interests of the passenger, or might not tell you about which are the streets that you might like try to avoid. So all these elements are interesting to know what are the human capacities and what are the technical capacities. Now, in order to learn, there are a few things that we should keep into account, and many of you presented some ideas related a minute ago. So as Barbara O'Cleary mentioned in her book, How to Learn, we know that we have to learn complex ideas in small doses, like the Pomodoro method. I don't know if you're familiar with it. The Pomodoro method is a strategy to make a tomato sauce. So you put the clock and you work 25 minutes in something that might be very hard, but you work only 25 minutes and very focused, and then you have a pause. You have a pause, and then you get back, other 25 minutes, and you repeat that 4 times, and then you have a long pause and a long break. So this Pomodoro technique is broadly used, broadly promoted, and proved to be very effective for learning difficult things. The second approach, the combination between focus and diffuse. Focus and diffuse. Focus, reading the blue book. Diffuse, travel around the city with a Vespa. Focus and diffuse. The combination is very important. If you stay focused many hours, you will lose the best of your brain. The third approach, short and long-term memory. Short memory, a snapshot, a picture of some key concepts. Long-term memory, that's something that you have inherited. Now, with these 3 elements, there are many more, but with these 3 elements, you have to nurture those with good sleep and good exercise. So many of us who, when we were in the university, were studying very hard the last night, that's not a good idea if you want to really make the best of your brain, because you have to have a good rest and then have exercise. So these are some of the things to think and reflect how we learn. Now, when you want to learn, for instance, a new language, but it can be a new discipline or a new approach, we can combine the micro and the micro learning. So for instance, say that you want to go to Berlin and you don't speak German only for a weekend. Well, probably it's a good idea to start with the micro learning, to use Duolingo and to do some small trainings and to understand specific phrases that can help you to navigate in the town. Now, if you really want to learn German, you probably will have to consider, in addition to the micro learning, the macro learning. So you will have to be willing to invest hours, days, months, and years, because you will have to dive much deeper in the complex ideas. And so Duolingo might not be enough. You might need to go to the Goethe Institute, for instance. And the combination of 2 are very important because we will develop different capacities with these 2 goals, okay? Now, as you mentioned in the presentation, many of you, we have to talk about emotions. One of the things that distinguish humans from machines is that we carry a lot of emotions, and emotions are strictly intertwined with the cognitive capacities. You cannot learn well when you are sad, when you have fear, or when you don't trust the person who is teaching you. Mitch Resnick, professor from MIT, said that if you want to build projects with peers, in addition of peers and projects, you have to play and you have to have passion. Play because you have to be open to mistakes, and you have to have passion because otherwise you are not going to make the best of you. That means, for instance, to find a good balance between the extrinsic motivations, for instance, getting a good score, a good qualification, and the intrinsic motivations. If you only focus on the extrinsic motivations, make your parents happy or get the degree that everybody wants you to get, that motivation will disappear, and it's highly likely that you will lose a lot of the things that you learn. If you're driven by the intrinsic motivations, which are the things that keep you awake in the night, the questions that you have, then that's a different business, because you will keep exploring. Now, emotions are very difficult to transmit in virtual environments. I would love to be with you in a square or in a plaza, having a coffee and discussing with you. We have all these technical barriers that make emotions difficult to translate through Zoom. Now, when we have the right balance of emotions, like for instance, some level of stress, a little level of stress, we can stimulate the learning. If we have a lot of stress, we will be in panic and we won't learn anything. If we don't have any stress and we are bored and disconnected, we don't have. So some level of emotion, for instance, presenting in public or learn a new person or sharing a secret are the kind of things that will help you to activate this emotion. So having said that, we can build up a good balance between the pedagogy and the heutagogy. Pedagogy is when it's centered on the teacher and the design of the strategy. The key player is the teacher. And the heutagogy, the key center is on the learner. The learner is driving his learning through curiosity, through the interest of exploring and finding new answers. And it's important to say that in the heutagogy approach, the teachers are really important, but in a different way. They are those who challenge with new questions, those who help to reflect on the problems, those who help to explore in new areas that you haven't explored. So it's a changing in the role, but it's certainly not something that means that teachers are not important. Now, we have been talking about the brain, but I would like to add a few other things. We have to understand a little bit of the metacognitive capacities that we have or we might not have. So for instance, we know that our brain hates ambiguity and uncertainty. At the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know to whom believe. We didn't know how long was going to be this thing. Our brain really suffers in those environments, and we tend to hold whatever we have. So we tend to reduce the complexity following patterns or stereotypes or previous experiences that we have. And that can be good in some sense because reduce complexity, but also can drive you to have a lot of prejudice. Prejudice, that's a difficult word. For instance, it's a bad idea to talk about the African people, because Africa is such a rich continent with people with all sort of walks of life, with all sort of interests, with such a diverse and rich gastronomy. And if we go and simplify and say Africa, for instance, we will be running a lot of stereotypes. And this is and by default action that our brain tends to do. The other one is cognitive dissonance. We tend to have a mismatch between our behaviors and our ideas. And sometimes we realize that we are doing things in which we don't necessarily think are right, or we don't necessarily agree. And then we have this electroshock that says, hey, something is wrong here. So we adjust the cognitive dissonance. And in many cases, we work in automatic fashion, meaning that we do what the rest of the group is doing. And I'm going to show you a beautiful example from the 50s on that. We remove our individuality and we work as a collective, and that can be very, very difficult and can bring you trouble, can bring us trouble. So that's why it's so important to have this level of questions, as you were saying, the smart skepticism, asking why and how and when. So let me show you a brief example, and Mateo, let me know if we have problems with the audio, of this idea of when individual people adjust to the collective. And we will see an experiment that was run in an elevator. Let's have a look at that.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff, will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again.
So now you will see the same exercise. So if you think we are the person who he's holding this with the person with the tie, and we many times we try to adjust to the collective in a way that might not necessarily might be what we want to do, and we quit our individuality to match the group. In some cases, that is a good idea. In the pandemic, it might be a good idea to follow the advice of the experts. But in many cases, the richness of the individuality can be sacrificed because you want to be part of the crowd. Now, thinking about how we think is really important in environments in which the system, the technologies are merging in a difficult way, the reality and the things that are not real. Fake news were mentioned a minute ago by Sonia. So the systems now are becoming much, much more advanced, and they're creating information that looks extremely reliable, but it's not. And there are different sort of unreliable information. We have the misinformation, which lacks precision, but is unintentional mistakes. And we have, in the other extreme, malinformation, which is deliberate public information that is designed to fool or fake the reality. And we have a huge gray area in between, right? And we, when develop capacities to navigate in this world, overwhelmed by information, we need to learn in between. So the fake news, I think, is a piece of cake in comparison with what the deep fake will bring us in terms of changing people, transforming, editing videos in ways that will be difficult to understand. And so that will require a whole new set of actions. And now we will do a quick break. We will go to Mentimeter. If you can put in the chat the link, we're going to do a quick exercise of 2 questions for you to help me to know what do you think about 2 questions that I have for you. So if you can put in the chat, this link is going to be, you go to menti.com. Let me know if you can see it. And I would love you to answer this question in 1 word. What capacity from your brain do you like the most? So I'm going to give you 40 seconds for you. Please let me know if you can log in there and answer the question from your perspective. Is that okay? So time is running. Please go to menti.com and dial the number that you see in the screen, 4332-6468. Okay, so people are logging in now. I see 3, 4, little by little, the participants are bringing 6 people already, but I think there are almost 200 of you. So I think we can easily get 100, no? So I'll give another pair of seconds to see if we can get online, and you can tell me what capacities from your brain do you like the most? Okay, we have now already 13 people. Yeah, if you want to add the words in the chat, if that is easier for you, I'm going to put in the chat again. We have 22 people. So we are going to Mentimeter. So let's have a look at what is emerging. We love the memory. That's great. Who doesn't like the memory? Otherwise, how can you know where you left your things the day before? We have creativity. We have, I guess you can see the screen, no? You have imagination. We have empathy. We have curiosity. And in the chat, other colleagues are building empathy, memory, imagination, accuracy. So just 10 more seconds to see if somebody else would like to jump in. But thank you very much to all of you who are already adding idea. Creativity also is a very popular word. Imagination, emotion. Okay, so it's very clear that we have our favorite words. I'm going to move now to the second question in the same platform. Let's see if we reach we are. I'm going to move to the second slide. I think you should be able to see the question. The question is, in 1 word, how does your brain learn the best? In 1 word, how does your brain learn the best? Let's see if you, sorry. If you want, you can add the answer as well in the chat. That's absolutely fine. Practicing. Okay, I see examples. Okay, what also? Doing, learning by doing. something is strange with the system, but people are luckily adding concepts in the chat. Let's have a look. What is wrong? Okay. Any other answer before we move forward? Multisensorialmente. Okay. Okay, so we have, there you are. We have a lot of answers. Exploration, connection, emotions, learning by doing, problem solving, novelty, sensing. That's super. Okay, that's super. I'm gonna give one last second to see if anybody else would like to add one word. Okay, a lot of people. Images, that's a great thing. And I have learned many times that youngsters search on YouTube before searching on Google. And that says a lot about how people would like to approach to new ideas, where images tend to be very helpful, as we said, for the short-term memory. So that's great. I'm going to leave that open so we can get back to that later. Thank you to everybody who share ideas. Now I want to talk about collaboration. Paulo Freire, a very famous pedagogist from Brazil, he wrote once, "No one educates anyone else, nor do we educate ourselves. We educate one another in communion in the context of living this world." So it's very interesting because this idea that someone teaches and someone learns is merged in a way that everybody learns from each other. And when you are teaching, also you are learning. And when you are learning, you are teaching another person. So it's a much more horizontal approach. And I think this is super interesting to know because, or to, not to know, because I'm sure you all know that, but to keep that into account, because in many cases, many countries during the pandemic, they have put a lot of emphasis in transfer information from point A to point B. And in this case, we are saying that it's not only having access to information, it's building the capacity or developing some relational practices, connections with others. And this, I think, is extremely important. Let me show you these interesting results from the OECD in this test of collaborative problem solving. They found a number of very interesting things. Number one, the strong academic skills do not translate into social skills. They are completely different packets, and you have to develop social skills as well, not only the cognitive ones. Number two, girls prove to be much more effective in developing collaborative problem solving in every country. Number three, this is very interesting as well. No immigrant students attending schools with more immigrants, they perform better in collaborative problem solving, meaning that the diversity of environments, the capacity of using, as Pedro was saying, the neuroplasticity really put us in a good place to learn with others. So if you want to foster collaborative problem solving, you have to develop environments in which you have chances to play, and also you have opportunities to have constructive relationships, for instance, playing some kind of sport. Now, we collaborate in very different ways. We can collaborate at the same time or in a synchronous way. We can collaborate in the same space, or as we are doing now in a distributed space. And each one of these quadrants will require different skills and different technologies. So let me give you a beautiful example of global collaboration. It's called NEMONET. So as many of you know, the ocean takes up to 90% of the heat from the greenhouse emissions, 90%. And that is generating many bad consequences, like the corals are being heated and they are dying. And that is called the mass bleaching. Now, less than 1% of the ocean floor consists of coral reef. It's a small amount, but in that tiny amount, more than 25% of the living species in the ocean are living, are exchanging and building the ecosystem. So keeping the corals alive is extremely important. However, there are so many varieties of corals that it would take the scientists 2 million years to classify all these corals. So they developed this tool called NemoNet, in which is an app where people can crowdsource their knowledge. So the app teach you how to learn what corals are, how to classify them, and then people play with this app, and that information trains a supercomputer to build a global data set of what is happening at the deeps of the ocean in the coral reef. And that information is extremely helpful to facilitate collaboration. So that's a clear example of distributed collaboration between different people at a large scale. But let's talk about social emotions for a moment. You mentioned a lot the idea of critical thinking, and I think this is a really strong component. Critical thinking can be defined in many ways, but it has to do with this idea of understanding how we think and understanding that we can question and we have to assess in different ways in order to address complex problems. So one example of critical thinking can be, for instance, computational thinking. And I'm going to give you an example that has nothing to do with computers. Jon Snow, which is not the Jon Snow that you saw on television, it's another Jon Snow. It's not the Jon Snow from the Game of Thrones, that was a doctor in the mid-19th century who was asked to help a very terrible pandemic, not the one that we are having now, but the one in the 1850, the cholera. And this doctor decided to build in a map the records of the people who were passing away because of this pandemic. And he was building in a map the number of diseases, and then he crossed that information with the location of the street pumps, like the one that you see in the street, that things that we used to press to get water. And he started finding correlations between the number of diseases and the street pumps location. So they removed the street pumps and the number of diseases dropped dramatically. This is an old school, non-technological computational thinking way, which is testing, finding patterns, and then intervening. Now, when we think that computational thinking is important, I don't mean only coding. Coding is one part of the computational thinking, but it's much more thinking in computational thinking like scientific thinking. So you find a complex problem like the cholera, and you decompose the different elements of the cholera, who are dying, where they're dying, with what frequency, what age, and then you try to find patterns. Do they have any relationship in terms of what they ate, what they drank, where they slept, or what are their kind of current health? And then you abstract and they say, okay, there's things that we find here that can be replicated to previous experiences. And then you find protocols and processes. So computational thinking is another way of formulating problems that can be represented in forms that can be used by systems. And that is an extremely powerful tool, a mindware tool, just like the scientific thinking, that can be extremely helpful for us. Now, one of the problems we have is we learn in so many ways that is, in some cases, we tend to neglect those pieces of knowledge that we have learned that are acquired through formal education. We learn in formal environments, but also we learn in informal environments. We learn intentionally, and we learn also in unexpected moments. So we are very good adding qualifications for the formal intentional learning. We have developed some strategies to bring validity to the formal unexpected learning, for instance, research, but also there are those learnings which are informal intentional, and those learnings which are informal unexpected. When we put our fingers into the electricity, it's an informal unexpected learning that we won't forget ever. Now, the question is, how can we bring more connections between these different environments? And I think that has a lot to do with evaluation. So if we only evaluate, we only assess the capacity of retaining information, we will miss all these other possibilities of transferring ideas from one context to another, the idea of connecting knowledge from different disciplines, or the idea of applying knowledge and skills into action. All these elements help us to transition from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. Now, one book that I was discussing with Pedro and Oscar earlier is think again. That says 5 interesting ideas in this context. One is to address complex problems, we have to be extremely helpful and humble to understand whether we might not know anything. And we have to be driven by curiosity and the willingness to discover. Number 2, questions. Rethink all the ideas that you have. Doubt all what you know. Be curious. Think like a scientist. I think it's a very simple way to simplify that. Number 3, learning to be wrong. If we want to explore something new, we have to be open to make mistakes. Otherwise, there's no way that we will be learning something. How do we make mistakes in a smart way? Be a big listener. Bring big ears and small mouth. I mean, learning from others means be able to explore and learn from different perspectives. Number 4, diversity is good. Remember the example of the immigrants. When we learn in environments where people think differently to us, we will be able to have a much more comprehensive understanding of reality. And finally, openness. Openness means to stand on somebody else's shoes to see what are the other perspectives, and that help us to move away from the oversimplification. So there are 5 questions that we have to take into account if we want to explore these cognitive tools. We have 2 options, 2 flavors. We can have the thinking automatically, when we process and we just repeat what we know, we just read what the algorithm is telling us as a first route on the Google map or the first result on Google search, or we can deconstruct the complexity and ask difficult questions. For instance, the pandemic has been an environment of a lot of complexity and uncertainty. So there are questions that we can ask. For instance, what leads to your assumption? When you know something, what was the background to provide that assumption? Why do you think that assumption is correct? Is that reliable? Do you have the evidence? Number 3, what might happen if you are wrong? In many cases, we are wrong and we don't want to see that we are wrong. Number 4, what are the uncertainties of your analysis? Every analysis has uncertainty. We all have blind spots, so we have to be aware of those. And finally, what are the disadvantages of your analysis? So when we ask these questions, when we want to explore new problems, we will be in a better position to go beyond our blind spot. So let me talk a little bit about digital culture, and if we have time, we will have open two more questions on a survey. Mahatma Gandhi, one of the big thinkers of the 20th century, he wrote this quote almost a century ago. If textbooks, he didn't like textbooks. If textbooks are treated as vehicles for education, the living word of the teachers has very little value. A teacher who teaches from textbooks does not impart originality to his pupils. In fact, he becomes a slave of the textbooks and has no opportunity or occasion to be original. It therefore seems that the fewer textbooks there are, the better it is for the teacher and his pupils. Gandhi was really reluctant to textbooks because they were prescriptive. And I have to say that 100 years later, we have the same tension with a lot of automatic systems that can be felt as external, like they predefine how we think. And I think this is a tension that we have had always, how we incorporate systems in a way that amplify our capacities and not only simplify our capacities. So we all know technologies can be very helpful, but they are not enough to really transform education. You have to elaborate on other capacities to make the best of the technology. Otherwise, technology will only help us to do the same that we did faster or more expensive. Now, the incorporation of technology in our life is massive, but at the same time, we have to consider that technology will require to have a smart use of technology. And sometimes, in many cases, we have to manage the technology and not the technology to manage us. So for instance, for the youngsters, do more things that make you forget to check your phone when you go to sleep is a good example of the time management. But there are other things that we have to consider. Let's have a look at this short video.
Really?
Okay, control over technologies and not being controlled by technologies. Other thing that we have to know when we think how we relate with technologies, videos and attention needs to be very narrow. So the attention is one of the most scarce resources, and I will show you a video on that. The longer the video, the poorer the attention that we have. So if we want to incorporate these resources to improve the learning experience, we have to be extremely careful of the amount of time that we require, because studies show us that the attention decreases massively when we have videos way longer than 3 or 5 minutes. Let me show you a small video about that.
And what we've been trying to say for years is that there's this invisible goal and all the incentives that are driving technology in one very specific direction. And that direction is really important to understand because it helps you predict the future. And that invisible goal is this race to capture human attention, right? There's only so much attention out there in the world, and we've always needed it, for TV, for radio, et cetera. But now that technology has this ability to pull on these different subtle levers of the human mind, we're getting better and better and better at manipulating the kind of human social animal. And when I was a kid, I was a magician, and so it really, that's important to understand. If you think about magic, right? Magic works on all human minds. It doesn't matter if you have a PhD. It doesn't matter what language you speak. It's a study of the limits and instincts of how human minds work. And the idea that there's things that a body of people, whether it's magicians or marketers or whatever, can understand about how the mind works, that work no matter what. It's like a banana works on a chimpanzee no matter what, because it's built into us. We're running evolutionary hardware. It's millions of years old. And so we have this technology environment which is evolving in this very specific direction of saying, how can I find out how to capture people's attention? And so it's like evolving and mutating new forms of bananas to pull us into, staying on the screen. And
attention, one of the most scarce resources. So that gets more complicated when the systems are becoming more and more advanced, and they're not only giving us the answers, but in many cases, they're even shaping the questions on our behalf. And in many cases, when you go to the internet, sometimes you have to work to help the systems, which is incredible, not necessarily good by any means. But all these elements have to be very carefully considered when we think how we work and we think with this system. Look at the example of Dr. Goldman, who was giving an interview on CNN, and she was talking about the global warming. Then she decided to post this picture of herself in the back part or the background of her interview. And it got huge amount of attention on the social media. So some people were disappointed, some of them were very happy. And that shows a lot of the conflicts of what is the image that we want to project when we are on the social media, and what is the image of our reality, and how we manage those boundaries is extremely, extremely helpful. So when we think, how can we integrate technology to learn better or to think better, we have to think in all these dimensions: screen time, critical thinking, administration of the privacy, building a digital footprint, building empathy with people, how to confront situations of cyberbullying or cybersecurity situations. All these elements are part from the digital citizenship, which are really important to develop when we want to make the best of the technology. So I'm about to finish now. Let me say that this phrase from David Buckingham is really important. We need to move beyond this idea that digital media is either offering risk or offering opportunities. They are offering both, and it will depend how we integrate that in an effective and smart and critical way in order to make the best of the technology. So let's summarize a little bit what we have said. In order to change the malware, we will have to navigate between agency and collective collaboration. At the same time, we will have to find a good balance between prescriptive guidance, but also self-driven motivation. At the same time, we have learned that we will be collaborating in a synchronous way as we are now, but also we can be collaborating in an asynchronous way, for instance, by mail. And at the same time, technologies help us to bridge a lot of the disciplinary boundaries. That doesn't mean that disciplines are bad, no, but we also can build spaces for disciplinary connections. And the same element also is valid for the idea of the intrinsic and the extrinsic motivations. If we only do things to make the people who is surrounding us happy, we might not be making the best of our motivations. And finally, we are not robots. Luckily, we are not robots, so we can balance between the cognitive and the affective components. Let me finish with 5 ideas that I think somehow summarize most of the things that we have said. Number 1, to be a smart thinker, you have to be a very critical user of the information. The information more popular is not necessarily the best information. We have to be capable and willingness to take this second thought of the information that we consume. Number 2, we have to learn to distinguish what is real from what is fake. And that requires a lot of training. That requires to understand the context. That requires to surround ourselves with people that we trust and people who can help us to see other perspectives. Number 3, the context is critical. So learn to contextualize new ideas, to know that a piece of data is not the same that someone who has experience on that. Learning that if we watch a video, we will have only one layer of the reality and we will need more in order to develop wisdom and more complex ideas on that approach. Number 4, it's increasingly important to learn to distinguish between humans and machines. There are much more systems we are giving us series and many other tools that we are bringing to our daily life that can bring confusion when we want to think individually or thinking like a machine. And number 5, we have to learn to manage our privacy. The more we move in this digital world, the more we have to be protective of what is ours and building these very difficult boundaries between personal life and public life, particularly when many of us are working from home. So I just want to finish with this phrase from the Samburu community in East Africa. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think for me, this is a phrase that summarizes most of what I say. Thank you very much. And I will stop here sharing the screen.
So thanks a lot, Cristobal. I think that I could imagine that all the people want to simply to clap to your marvelous lecture. Thanks a lot, because I think this is very, very inspiring. And so probably there are some questions, not many. I think that they are going to start coming, but I wanted to pose one very general question, and knowing the people working in our project, I think that a general question, could it be in this kind of very thick forest you have described, and in this forest is full of questions also. I mean, and I adore this way of explaining, because the problems are many and we also have to think together what is to be done. Which do you think, I mean, this is among a question or an asking for recommendations, which is the real role of the new teacher in this society? I mean, because we are in the middle of many impulses sometimes. So many teachers are in the schools, and they need and they have the obligation of following a way of doing things. But in another way, there are many that want to innovate, to make things different. I mean, we have always in our minds the idea of Professor Keating in that Poet Society, in the film. I mean, what is to be done? Which is the path for the teacher?
That's a great question, I think, and also I think, Pedro, that the parents, I assume many parents understand the role of teachers very different in March 21 than in March 2020. Many parents are really been suffering because they have to try to emulate the work of teachers. And we all know that in many cases, in many societies, the value of teachers is not recognized as as a critical position, but it is, and now they have been proved to be first liners, and the work that teachers have been doing these 12 months are incredible. Not because they've been teaching remotely, but because the teachers know better than anyone that it's not about transferring pieces of information, it's about building relationships. And that's difficult in this environment, no? If you and I were having a coffee, it would be a completely different conversation. It can be the same conversation that we are here. So you and I, we have been in digital environments. We knew in the past that that really makes a difference. But despite that, there are a lot of barriers that we have to address because we have the chat, we have the cables, we have the Wi-Fi. It's not the same than looking at your eyes, looking at your skin, your pupils, all these sort of things. Now, at the same time, the teachers of today are teaching in an environment overwhelmed by information, overwhelmed by other voices that might say something similar to you or completely different. And it's difficult to be the voice that brings the truth in environments where there are so many voices around. There are so many cooks in the kitchen. And I think that the idea of having higher levels of agency from the learner is going to be helpful, but not all the learners will be at the same level. Some of them will require more support. So teachers, it's always said that the teachers are coaches and mentors, but I think we have to unpack what does it mean, because it's super easy to replicate these cliches that are being said ever and ever. For me, a mentor is a person who makes difficult questions. It's a troublemaker. It's someone who puts you in difficult positions. It's, as I don't know if you remember, but I read these 5 questions that are not mine and from scientists from the NASA. And this is the best way of unpacking fake truths that we think are real. And I think a teacher is a troublemaker in that sense. I bring you to the corners which are difficult to you, and also helps you to transition from the, I remember the example of the elevator. Many times we think automatically. So a teacher who can help you to say, hold on, maybe I'm wrong, or let me have a second thought, or let me go for another source, is going to be really important. And at the same time, I don't think we as educators need to be overwhelmed by the quick transformation of technology or the huge amount of information, because the role of us is to provide this emotional support and not necessarily being the last source of truth. And that is a change in the mindware. Remember, the hardware and the mindware, I think, is a change in the mindware that is going to take us a lot of work. You're mute, I think.
In another sense, I wanted to comment with you also something having to do with this great recommendation you did of the book Think Again, yeah? And it is absolutely important, and this is a marvelous lesson of this concrete book, the necessity, the need we have of deconstructing our knowledge to unbuild what we have learned in order to have the possibility of thinking once again. So lately, I was reading, for instance, about the idea of gastronomy of Ferran Adrià. And some time ago, I couldn't understand that. But now I think I'm starting understanding it. What he is doing is simply to avoid thinking gastronomy as a collection of old recipes, of old traditions, and simply to start asking a tomato, why can I eat a tomato? What is a tomato? Why am I eating the flesh of the tomato and not the leaves? What can I do with the tomato by myself? So, I mean, this process of starting posing questions, but very basic questions from the very beginning. I mean, this is such an extraordinary way of discovering everything that it is really amazing. And I wanted you to simply to give a couple of thoughts about what this book Think Again is offering, because I find it fantastic.
That's a great. And I think then we have so many tomatoes in our life that we don't consider in a different way. For instance, when we travel, we have the chance to see how people deal with tomatoes in different cultures. And tomatoes can be the school. Tomatoes can be our relationship with our loved ones. Tomato can be our relationship with the environment. That's why I think that, for instance, the PhD students should talk more with kids, because it's the only way of asking difficult questions. And the kids don't have any barrier in terms of asking questions that we might consider silly. And the other approach that I think is helpful is to be more thoughtful on our mistakes. When we reflect in a smarter way of our mistakes, we learn from them. But we live in a society that we tend to hide our mistakes, put them under the carpet. And for instance, in the IT world, the geeks, they meet a lot to discuss mistakes. They do this failure-ton, like this marathon of mistakes. But I haven't seen that a lot in lawyers, for instance, or in architects. So reflecting on the mistakes, I think, can be a very good way of helping. But that means well, we need to be humble. The only way of learning is being able and open to make mistakes.
Great. I have here a couple of questions. So the first is from Daniela Barrena, and she says, Cristobal, do you think that we need to review the curriculum, or is it enough with putting an eye on pedagogy?
That's a good one. And whatever I say, people will be angry. So one of the problems that we have with the curriculum is a lot of challenge. One is that the curriculum is a bridge between the past and the future. It's a bridge between what we think is important and how we prepare the people for the future. It's a bridge between the tradition, and it's a bridge to prepare people for a journey that we don't know which direction they will go. Now, the curriculum is a complex idea because it's understood by different people in different ways. The curriculum can be a map, which tells you in which direction you have to think, or can be a compass. We just show you trends and directions, and you learn how to navigate. Many experts criticize that when governments do changes in the curriculum, they usually add more things. They don't remove things out. And this is the whole idea of the brain as an empty vessel that need to be filled with ideas. If we think the curriculum as a compass that shows you in which direction, or put it another way, a curriculum as a source of questions, not a source of answers that no one asked, it would be a curriculum that probably will open more room for exploration. And I think the role of curriculum cannot be the same that used to be 30 years ago when didn't exist the internet. But that is difficult. And I think we can build an invisible curriculum of the things that we think important, and we make a bridge between the formal official curriculum and the other sources of learning that are so important, which not only should emphasize, in addition to knowledge, skills, but also emotions. And I haven't seen a lot of curriculums emphasizing the emotions.
Thanks a lot. I have a question from Gloria Alcayaga. Thanks a lot, Cristobal. We agree about the changes that are needed, how to carry them when education structures are so hard to change. Any advice?
Okay, well, I think that's a great question. And I think we have different rhythms or speed of change. Technologies change at an incredibly speedy way. Even for those of us who study technology, it's hard to keep the trace. We as people can incorporate new ideas, but don't change the behaviors very easy. It takes us a while to transform. Remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, it was difficult to work from home. And when the pandemic will be gone, it will be difficult to get back because we have this delay in change of behavior. And even way behind our human changes of behavior are the organizational changes that usually are many change resistant because they are designed to be resilient to changes. So one of the problems we have in education, but also in other areas, is we have people thinking in ideas of the 21st century with organizations that are designed and structured in ways that are representative of the previous centuries. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone wants to change. They're happy. There are people very happy with the existing paradigm. So we have to speak these two languages, I think. We have to speak the language of the tradition, and at the same time, the language of the transformation. The space that you have in Brains for Europe is just this language of transformation. How to make that changes happen? Well, I think the pandemic is a great opportunity. As the neuroplasticity opportunity to explore and experiment and ensure that many of the explorations that we have done this year will need to remain and sustain. Because many of the explorations were a complete disaster and others can be really incorporated in a massive scale. But in order to do that, we have to be open to explore. So I love the idea of thinking teachers as researchers who are documenting their mistakes, their lessons learned, and we should push the system, the educational organizations, to be open for these transformations as well. It's a hard work, but I'm sure we can do it.
So in relation with this idea you are now saying, at the very beginning of the lecture, there was a question by Diana Gonzalez. She said, I'm translating, she speaks about elements to consider in the design of online courses having to do with this new world that has got its origin in this COVID moment, yeah? Online courses introducing, so today tendencies and needs. So we are doing, so Diana is saying that we are changing the way of teaching, because we are teaching through the computer, but we are doing the same as in the classes, yeah? So she wants to know, what do we have to do to include critical thinking, assertive communication, creativity. So, and I could add, so this is a challenge for everybody, or do we need some guidelines to follow?
Okay, I love the answer, the question, and the extension that you gave. Let me start with this image, and I will try to address it. Can you see the image, Pedro?
Yes.
Do you see it?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, so let me start with the toolkit, some very tiny little recommendations to consider. Obviously, that won't apply everywhere, but these are some things that we can consider. For instance, the use of the time. We cannot have the same 45, 60 minutes lecture that we used to have face-to-face, because it's not going to work. Everyone will be sleeping, and even if they're looking at us, they will be turning off the system. Two, we have to stand on the student's shoes. What are the realities? What are the concerns? How we can adjust to the concerns and the anxiety they may have in this environment. Number three, the chat is critical. I mean, having people feedback on a regular basis is really important. Number four, breakout sessions, not one too many, but many too many discussions. Number five, let's be sure that people mute their microphones, and let's not force the students to turn on the webcam. We love as teachers to see the webcam. Students in many cases don't want to show the realities, and we shouldn't force them to do that. So all these things are very concrete kind of recipe things that we are learning during this time, right? But I don't think that's the end of the story. I think there are much more deeper transformations than that. Those examples that I gave are little techniques that we can consider in a much more functional way. But I think there are a much deeper transformation, which is a change in the mindset. When the technology is more invisible, when we encourage curiosity and creativity, the intrinsic motivations are not only the extrinsic. That means to listen more to students. That means to bring other voices to the classroom. So for many years, we have heard that the digital tools are going to be the future of education. But at the same time, for many years, those of us who study this world, we have seen that these transformations haven't come because of the technology. They have come because of much more disruptive ideas from people. So technology is helpful, but it won't make the deal if we want to make these transformations. So a better use of the time. What is synchronous? What is asynchronous? What is in person? What is remote? How do we build trust? What level of engagement we require? Are, I think, non-technological questions that will really help us to make the best of the technology.
So I have another question from Gustavo Andrade. He says, the educational bureaucracy wants to measure standardized learning outcomes, but the teacher does not have standardized students. how to address this paradox?
Hola, Gustavo. Yes, that's a great question. Gustavo is a good friend, and we have had this discussion in the past. Look, I understand the concern, and if we all learn differently, why we have to have all this one-to-many structured system? And I think this is a tension that exists and probably will remain. But at the same time, it's true that if we don't have some sort of tools to standardize at least the functional skills that help you to read, write, numeracy, we hardly will get to the more advanced capacities, which are the imagination and the sense making and the critical thinking. So I don't think we have to standardize every single thing, but some basic baseline to understand where the education system failing, I think is helpful. The problem is when all the policies are exclusively driven by these standardized tools, then is when we oversimplify the complexity. So we are living in a world today in which there's a lot of interest in personalization. So these systems that help you to be personalized, a kind of Netflix for education. Now the question is you will hardly find a better personalized approach than a human when it's looking at you and trying to reply to your emotions. And I think that's the beauty of the teacher-student relationship. So I think a little bit of standardization is helpful, but when that is the only driver for measuring success, we are just watching television in black and white and we are not understanding the whole complexity of it.
So thanks a lot. Now it's time for Maria Delgado Esteban. Cristobal, are we really prepared to be mentors or teachers of the new generations of immediacy? How can we get it? Thanks.
Great question. Well, I don't know if we are prepared. We are talking with people from all these countries, but I think how can we get prepared having these discussions that we're having today with other voices, with people who might be thinking completely opposite to myself, but having these discussions in which we have a peer space exchange, we share our opinions, we try to bring our construction of the world, and we mingle and we try to unlearn. It's quite likely that many of us won't change anything of your ideas that you brought today. But when you go to sleep, when you go to play tennis during the weekend, when you have a conversation in the bar, you will start building bridges, and these synapses that happen when we sleep, have rest, eat well, are the kind of transformation we will require. Cooking a transformation in the brain takes a while, and that's okay. That's okay. But at the same time, we have to push ourselves to get out of the comfort zone, because there's nothing more cozy to be with the people who think like you, to talk about the books that you already like, and to feel like, all right, this is my community support. That's helpful to some extent. But if we only do that, we will be in troubles. And you know what? One of the problems we have with the internet is the algorithms build us bubbles of those cozy environments when we only talk with people who think like us. And our understanding of the reality is simplified. So we have to push harder than ever to understand other ways of understanding the world.
Thanks a lot. Now from Francisco José Ruiz Rey, is it possible to transform the teacher using artificial intelligence?
Wow, we are moving in this direction. There is a wonderful book that I strongly recommend from Neil Selvin. Maybe someone can add it in the chat. It's called "Should We Replace Teachers by Robots?" And I think it's an interesting book because it's a provocation. Obviously, he's not recommending that, no? And I think the AI is doing very interesting things. But the AI, the huge amount of AI, artificial intelligence, is narrow AI. So you ask Siri something and it gives you an answer. You ask a software to scan something and will tell you what it sees. Or you will explore with voice and will recognize your voice. So voice recognition, image recognition, text recognition, face recognition are some of the examples. But it doesn't exist in general AI today as we see in the movies, like Her or 2001 Odyssey. So this idea of a broad AI today doesn't exist. And by the people who have been building AI, they say that it might happen in 10 years or in 100 years. We don't know yet. So don't worry, teachers won't be replaced by AI. But at the same time, there are a few things that AI can be extremely helpful. I mean, Duolingo use some kind of AI for voice recognition. And is Duolingo better than the teacher? Of course it's not. But a teacher who also uses Duolingo as an extra resource will be doing a much more comprehensive work. So I don't think it's A or B, it's A and B, and understanding the limitations of the tools as well. So when we do that, I think we will be in a better position.
Thanks a lot once again. Now from Nara Sardin, how to learn to be healthier and happier across the pandemic process?
Oh, I love that question. In the same way that we should be cognizant of how much time we spend on the technology and the attention that we invest in these tools, I think we have to find a better balance to have a healthy life. More and more people are wearing these Fitbits here to tell you how many steps have you done and all that. You can do it however you want. But I think the idea of understanding that we have to be away from the computers is helpful. We have to unplug ourselves. Pasi Salberg, this very famous educational expert from Finland, he said something that I like. He said, kids should spend more time playing in the streets, in the parks. Kids should write to their grandpas a written letter, not an email, a written letter a couple of times per month, because you will develop other capacities. So having conversation with people face to face is difficult today, but these are the kind of things that should keep us also stimulating other ways of understanding reality. So it's not, remember the picture of people pulling the rope in different directions. It's not in favor or against technology, but it's a right combination of cognitive, technological, and nature. And I think that is difficult because we are living in a world that when we go for running, we bring the phone, right? So we really had a hard time unplugging ourselves. But I think it's the best way of having a right balance.
Thanks a lot. And now it's time for Angelica Mika. What do you think about overfitting? How to avoid it in deep learning?
Sorry, I don't overfitting.
So overfitting, I can write it in the chat. Overfitting.
Overfitting meaning practicing a lot of sport.
I don't know if it is maybe overthinking.
Overthinking.
No. This is. I'm not sure because it is a question of. Yeah, let me see once again because there are many things here. Overfitting, I think.
Maybe the person can help us to ask it in a slightly different way.
Angelica Mika probably can explain.
My fault, please, but I don't understand the question. Can you help me to approach it and be happy to give you my opinion?
So probably we wait for Angelica Mika. Probably she can tell us what is well. Oscar is telling us that this is a kind of adjustment, over adjustment. I don't know, but if Angelica Mika can explain it a little bit to us in the chat, and we can go to another question probably. Let me see. Just one moment. Just wait. I've got another one. Yeah, wait. I mean, yeah, here we agree about the changes that are needed, how to carry them when the education structures are so hard to change. This is something for Oscar Garrido. So once again, we agree about the changes that are needed, but how to carry them when the education structures are so hard to change.
Great. Now, probably change, what means change for the 163 people who are attending today this conversation will mean completely different things. In some cases, change will be changing in the pedagogical approach, changes in other cases will be changing the environment changes can be developing other capacities or other kind of incentives. And I think understanding that change is something that is extremely subjective. We have to have openness for exploration. I think the idea of building pedagogical labs in the schools are a good way of exploring these micro changes, because we can have very macro changes of the society or transformations in the systems. I think we have been, in a way, despite the hard moments of the pandemic, we've been extremely lucky because many transformations have been happening in the last 12 months. And that is an opportunity. That is an opportunity to push for changes. Some of these changes will remain, some of them will go forever. But if we try to see at the positive side, despite a lot of people have suffered during the pandemic, there have been opportunities for transformation. And that really tears down this idea that education systems cannot change. Now, the question is, do we want to go for changes like having Zoom and Fitbits and apps in every class, or we want to go for really transformational changes, the ones that help us to think in a different way, the ones that help us to connect the formal and the informal learning, the one to help us to connect emotions and cognition. And I think these more transformational changes take more time. But having a frontier group like the one who is here, the early adopters, pushing the boundaries, I think is the right way to help those who might be more reluctant for changes to open to these difficult questions.
I think that step by step we are going to finish, because I mean this is a great effort for you. And but I have here one question from, I think that from Turkey, from Gulsum User. Probably my pronunciation is not good, but Gulsum is telling us, could you tell us about new educational meadows and up-to-date research that will guide education? How is education taking shape?
Great question. I think there are a lot of transformation happening today at a different scale, at different levels. We have micro transformations. For instance, as you remember, before the pandemic, we used to talk about the flipped classroom. This is a tiny little transformation that now is happening in reality. In the blended learning is we are transitioning from something that was in the frontier to something that is becoming a center. There are transformations that I've seen in other countries in which there are no high tech, they're low tech, meaning they go to the farm and they go and harvest something and they discuss while they're harvesting vegetables, what to learn from those in terms of the environmental impact, the history of those lettuces and the economical implications they could have, or the same in the kitchen. And I think these transformations are very important. There are transformations happening in the level of technology. We have more and more data about how learners are learning. And we as teachers and educators need to have more proficiency in terms of how to read this data in order to support the students where they need. But I would say that one of the most intensive transformations that we expect to see in the next couple of years will have to do with more and more influence of semi-intelligent systems ruled by very large corporations. And I think, I don't think that's good or bad, but we have to be prepared for that. We will have to develop new capacities. We as teachers, we as a system, how to use this information on benefit of the teacher and the student, and not in the other way around. So I am a strong believer in putting all the energy in the humanware and also in the hardware, in terms of hardware, not the hardware, no, the hardware, emotions and ideas as one of the key drivers to bring the technology in a smart way.
So I want to finish with some things. First of all, so the chat is full of people saying thanks to you, Cristobal. I think that this is a marvelous image of what the relation between a master or a teacher and the students has to be. Yeah, I think that it is this conversation and fluency of the conversation and of the ideas is the main example to give an image of what you are talking about. Yeah, I have always thought in this Indian proverb that says that nothing can be taught and everything has to be learned. Yeah, but I think that some people like you, and I have to be absolutely sincere, help the rest to learn quite a lot. Yeah. I give you all my thanks, Cristobal. It has been an amazing occasion. I hope that it wouldn't be the last one. I think that all our expectations are absolutely fulfilled with your words, and I think that as the people is telling in the chat, so we are much wiser than a couple of hours ago now. Yeah, and overall we have much more questions and much more ideas. Yeah, so thanks a lot. And I don't know if you want to say something to end before I say that. So a couple of things about the next meeting. Do you want to say something more?
Just my gratitude to you, the staff team who organized this, to every one of the 156 people who decided to stay at the end, and encourage you to keep up with the good work. I mean, building connections and networks of colleagues who want to reinvent and to rethink the education, I think is one of the elements that keep the education systems alive. So thank you so much for that. And I'm also a great supporter of the work that you do, and I'll be very close looking at the next steps.
Thanks a lot. We are going to give you all the feedback we are getting from your lecture, and I want to also express my gratitude and the gratitude of the whole crew of the project to all the people that have been today in this Friday just attending this extraordinary session. And I remember for many of you that we have another meeting the 31st of May at so that this is going to be from Poland at 5 p.m. Polish hour, and we are going to do there the next multiplier event dedicated overall to the students of the different schools. I have to say that one of the questions today, I've been told, was a question of a student from Turkey. Yeah, and this is something really motivating. Thanks a lot, Cristobal. Thanks a lot to all of you. Have a nice evening. In some countries, a nice so midday in another, and and all the best to all of you. Thanks a lot.
Take care. Thank you very much.
Bye.